So without further ado, I think it's time to start, not before time, start with a meditation, a serenity breath meditation, a tranquility meditation, a meditation that's intended to cultivate, to bring about calm and pleasant abiding, a meditation that's intended to cultivate joy, a sense of well-being. So you can leave your camera running if you want to, but sometimes it helps to turn your camera off. I'm just going to share some instructions on the screen. So when we take our posture, when we come to our seat, whether you're sitting on a settee or a chair or a cushion or a stool, we do it quite intentionally. And we remind ourselves, we bring to mind why we're doing this. And invariably, it's because we wish to move away from suffering, to move towards the end of suffering. And we want to make that movement away from suffering out of compassion and not out of aversion. So it's about following our heart's desire to awaken. So our posture represents that desire. So it's upright, it's dignified, it's alert. It's not rigid, it's relaxed but alert. A posture that represents awakening, your heart's desire to awaken. Posture that represents your desire to move away from suffering towards the end of suffering. Just keep that in mind. An aspiration born out of compassion, not born out of aversion or fear. So we might let our eyes gently close. If it's comfortable for you, just let your eyes gently close. Let your face be soft, jaw relax. Let your shoulders drop back to open up the heart area quite naturally. Allow your arms and your hands to rest easily. And feel yourself grounded and supported. We might take a very deep breath in, completely filling our lungs, and a very long, slow, deliberate breath out, feeling the breath in the whole body. And perhaps one more time, very deep, full breath in. And then a very long, slow breath out. Feeling the breath in the whole body. Letting go of any tension around the tummy. Let your belly be soft. Let it relax. Letting go of any stresses and tension on the next out breath. And the next out breath. And for the next 15 minutes or so, there's nothing else to do. There's nowhere to go. There's no one special to be or to become. The Buddha's instructions for breath meditation are really quite straightforward. He said when you're breathing in, you should be fully aware that you're breathing in, fully aware of the in-breath. When you're breathing out, you should be fully aware of the out-breath. Breathing in, I'm fully aware of the in-breath. Breathing out, I'm fully aware of the out-breath. And we might bring our awareness to the air passing over our top lip, or the passage of air at the nostrils, or the rise and fall of the belly, or even the breath as it moves through the whole body. However you best sense the breath or are aware of the breath, that's where you place your awareness, that's where you place your watching. Invariably, the mind will wander, you lose your awareness. That's what the mind does, it wanders away on its own. But as soon as you notice that, we just smile. And then with a very friendly, gentle note of not breath, we return our full awareness to this magical process of breathing. Breathing in, I'm fully aware that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm fully aware of the out-breath. Our remaining time in this meditation, we might just shift our awareness and shift our intentionality. We'll use a couple of phrases that the Vietnamese teacher Thich Nhat Hanh suggests. And we whisper these phrases silently at the back of our mind. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Just like all the best Buddha statues around the world, they always have a very small smile, a joyful, blessed, contented smile. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Thank you for joining me. I hope that meditation was useful. I wanted to go back to last week and perhaps apologise for rushing into this this series of talks. I think the whole medium for sharing, teaching is new to me, and the time constraint puts a different focus on matters. So I rather jumped in at on a gallop last week, wanting to rush through the first theme of the Little Hungry Ghost booklet. Wherever it is. The Little Hungry Ghost booklet. So I wanted to take a step back and just introduce the booklet itself. And the booklet contains my formulation of what I would have liked to have heard 23 years ago when I woke up one morning sober, when I made a commitment to myself not to stop drinking and not to start taking any other drugs. And I struggled for a couple of years, half-heartedly sober, until, as I mentioned last week, I met the abbot of a monastery in Thailand who explained or gave me, inspired me about the possibility of being a difference between abstinence, about stopping myself doing something I wanted to do, and abandonment, abandoning an old life and being committed to something different. And that made a big change in my recovery, my awakening from how things were to how things are. I moved from a half-hearted recovery to a wholehearted recovery, committed to being different in the world. And then over a period of years, I dipped my toe into Buddhism, both at that monastery where I became a monk on a couple of occasions for short periods, and at other monasteries and in other Buddhist settings. And then in 2009, I attended a Buddhist Recovery Network conference in Los Angeles, the first bringing together of teachers from around the world, or people promoting. I wasn't a teacher at the time. I was just simply promoting, Buddhism as a potential way of waking up, of relieving our suffering from addictions. And after that, at the end of the 3 days of that conference, I made a commitment to myself to, when I got back to England, to start a Buddhist recovery meeting, which I did within a couple of weeks. In November 2009, I started a sit and share meeting at the local Quaker meeting hall in Newbury in Berkshire. And for the next year, people dropped in and people dropped out, and most weeks I sat on my own, but just with that intention to offer service, to be there. Following that, that meeting, that sit and share meeting, picked up, and it moved on and on, and then I decided to start trying to offer these teachings in a retreat setting, and that's where this little book came from, putting together the practices and principles that I'd picked up at that time, that I'd been using at the time, to make my life easier. The things that I found useful. So not particularly in any Buddhist traditional sense of a particular path. They're the things that I found useful. And looking at this little booklet over the last few weeks now that I've been thinking about presenting these talks, I can see, how much my practice has changed. The path in here is still very much a path I would recommend for early recovery from, particularly from waking up from addictions and compulsions, addictions of any type, and compulsions of any type. Just for me, this is a gentle introduction, a gentle laying the foundation of building a practice that will sustain you for the rest of your life. So we rather jumped in. You didn't rather jump. I rather jumped in last week and going straight into generosity, into truth and truthfulness as this starting point. But what I wanted to do was just explain a little bit about this wonderful model, this mind model of how our minds work, and these realms of the realms of becoming. I'm just going to bring up some some slides. If I can share my screen, I'll have to flick through these slides. Let's start here. Hopefully you can see that, and I'll see if I can bring this slide up. So you might recognize the center of that diagram is very similar to the center of the diagram on the front of the Hungry Ghost booklet. And around those two inner circles, there's 6 other, the outside circle is divided into 6 and the outer circle is divided into 12. We won't go to the very outer circle. That's a whole investigation on its own. A very wonderful model, psychological model of our mind and how we make contact with the world around us and how that contact drives us into becoming. But we're not going there in this series of talks. We're going to concentrate on very much on the center, on that there's a hen or a cock in the middle of that diagram. The things that drive our existence, that drive our suffering, this the cock or the hen of greed, of craving, of infatuation, the snake of hatred, of aversion, and the pig of ignorance, of delusion, confusion. And these 3, sometimes referred to as 3 poisons, sometimes referred to as 3 fires, they drive our existence, whether we spot them or not. And they form the center part of this wonderful model, this psychological model of these worlds of existence. And then last week we were talking about truth and truthfulness and what are Buddhist truths. And one Buddhist truth is this law of karma, that dark actions, dark thoughts, dark words lead us down to heavenly states, but bright thoughts, bright words, bright actions lead us up to, the dark thoughts lead us down to hellish states, and the bright thoughts lead us up to heavenly states. But this is a very old traditional representation of this model, in which we have 3, the southern hemisphere, or the southern sectors are hell realms, the hell realm of the animals, the hell realm of the hot, cold torture hell, and the hell realm of the hungry ghosts of unsatisfiable craving. And at the top we have the heaven realms, and there's the top realm is the heaven of the shining ones, the stars, the gods. And this next portion, which was a later edition, added very much after Buddha's time, at which point there was only 2 heaven realms. This realm was added later, and this is called the realm of the angry gods, the demigods. People who have, or gods that have everything, but they still want more. So the gods in this realm are angry and fighting, and they're trying to get to this wish-fulfilling tree that's in the realm of the gods and the shining ones. But the last heaven realm, the one we're interested in, is the heaven realm of being human, the blessing of being human, where we can live with 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows, a realm of possibilities. So my thoughts around offering my very first retreat, the night before I offered my very first retreat, was, why am I doing this? Why have I put myself under all this pressure? What am I trying to do? And it dawned on me what I was trying to do, even though I didn't really know this model at the time, was simply move from this realm of if I can put it across, this realm of hungry ghosts to the realm of being human without having to go through all the other hell realms in order to get there. Now, when I stopped drinking, I didn't move to the human realm. All I did was shifted sideways into the hot and cold torture hell realm, where I beat myself up, self-loathing, self-hatred, unforgiveness, miserable thoughts, not good enough thoughts. A very uncomfortable place to be, but better than being in the hell realm of the hungry ghosts, this realm of unsatisfiable cravings, realm where everything you touch literally turns to shit. And that's one of the classic descriptions in there. And each of these realms, be it heaven realm or a hell realm, they've got multiple minor hell realms within them, or different realms within each of them. Very complicated, very colourful places. And in a traditional sense, you know, these are the places we go to lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, depending upon our karma, depending upon the actions we've taken and the results of those actions. Personally, I don't believe in future lifetimes or past lifetime. This one's enough for me. And these hell realms move me. You know, I move through these realms, not just the hell realms, but the heaven realms, fortunately, you know, from moment to moment. When I gave up drinking, I moved sideways from the hungry ghost realm into the hot and cold torture hell, where I just beat myself up verbally, mentally, psychologically. And even I moved into the animal realm, where the animal realm it's just a matter of survival, just getting by, just existing, you know, maintaining, you know, some sort of living, not a happy place, but a place of survival. So I just moved sideways from the hungry ghost realm into the hot and cold torture realm, into the animal hell realm. But then, you know, after a couple of years and meeting this abbot in Thailand and getting this idea about abstinence was keeping me a prisoner, whereas abandonment was setting me free to be what I wanted to be, to sow the seeds I wanted to cultivate. Then I moved to being human and to appreciating the 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows that it makes up being human. And since that time, with practice, with a change of attitude, a change of paradigm shift with how I see the world, you know, I get to spend some time up in the heaven realms, in the godly realms as well. But all day long, you know, the opportunity to move between each of those realms, but each time we come into contact with a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste, a touch, or a thought is there. And so being mindful, this idea of keeping something in mind and knowing where you are, what you're doing, being in this present moment, yeah, deliberately keeps me where I want to be. And I notice when I slip down into a depression, into a bad mood, that I've moved from a heavenly state or a hellish, a human state into a hellish state, and it's interesting to watch that process. So, if you believe in past lives, if you have trust in future life, then you know, please don't be offended by my lack of faith in those things. My focus is on this life, and I see myself spinning around in those realms on a daily basis, on a moment by moment basis. And the example I often give on retreat is at the end of a 5-day retreat, I hand out feedback forms. And I ask people as an act of generosity, as an act of dharma, as an act of generosity, to fill out the feedback forms, because what they've got in the feedback forms informs me, and I do make changes to future retreats. So at the end of a 5-day retreat, I might pick up the first feedback form, and it says, "Vince, you are wonderful. You've changed my life. It will never be the same. When are you doing your next retreat?" And I'll tell all my friends. And I look at that, and straight away up in the heaven realms, I couldn't be any happier. And then I pick up the next one, and it says, "Dear Mr. Cullen, you've just wasted 5 days of my life." I'm down in the hell realms, the hot and cold hell realm. What what am I doing here? What am I teaching? I'm useless. I shouldn't be doing this. So I can move from a heavenly mind state to a hellish mind state instantly, just by reading something, just by some words, some squiggles on a bit of paper can send me from heaven to hell. I must be honest here, I've never had such a feedback form saying that I've wasted someone's time. They're not all glowing, but nothing quite as bad as that. So I just wanted to put some context behind the title of these set of talks and the title of this booklet about going from hungry ghost, this hellish place of unsatisfiable craving, deeply unsettled place, to being human. And being human means being with the 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows of normal life. It's not an absolute heaven realm, but it is a place of potentiality and possibilities. So I might pick up from page number something in the Little Hungry Ghost booklet. Yeah, if you print it off and read it, I make this point. I started to struggle for a while with the idea of recovery. The word recovery, certainly in English, it implies going backwards to recovering a state that had been lost. And from my perspective, there was nothing in my past life, once I'd given up drinking, that I wanted to go back and recover. Far from it. So I got stuck on this word recovery, and that's why I started to use waking up to this life. That was my recovery, was waking up to reality. But then I was listening to a talk by another teacher on one occasion, and he was using the word recovery again and again and again. And I thought, well, how can I come into a peaceful relationship with this word? And then it dawned on me, well, what I'm doing when I wake up, when I stop a behaviour and thinking that's damaging to me, be that a substance addiction or some other compulsion, some other craving, compulsion, when I bring that to a close, what I'm doing is I'm recovering all of life's possibilities, all of life's potentiality that my compulsions or addictions were stopping me doing, stopping me having. So there is a recovery there as such, recovering possibility and potentiality, which is the main characteristics of the human realm, possibility and potentiality. So if I use the phrase wake up or the word recovery, it means absolutely the same thing. So if you do print the book off, there's lots of well, it's not lots, there's the minimum amount of detail that you need to fit into a 48-page booklet. Okay, so conscious of time. So that's the sort of introduction. And last week we started at the beginning, which was certainly the beginning of my path to waking up, my path to recovering possibilities and potentiality, and that was seeing the truth, coming into relationship with the truth. First of all, the truth as just acknowledging things as they were. I was an alcoholic. I couldn't say that for years, even after I'd stopped drinking. But I had to acknowledge it on the evening that I stopped drinking. The evening I made that commitment not to drink again. I had to acknowledge it. I had to surrender to the truth. That was a fact. My drinking was out of control. My drinking was going to kill me. My drinking was dragging me down to the hell realm. So I wasn't aware of this lovely model at that time, but I certainly felt it and felt something very similar to it. So the truth of how things were, and surrendering to that truth, and then making a commitment, which is in Buddhist traditions, and certainly at Wat Tampa Bok Monastery in Thailand, this embracing a truth, embodying a truth of a commitment not to take drugs and alcohol for the rest of my life. So embracing that truth, And then I dipped my toe into Buddhist teachings and learnt about some of the truths being offered there. And we sort of mentioned last week the truth of these Four Noble Truths. They don't feature heavily in this booklet. They're starting to feature more heavily, or they have started to feature more heavily in my practice and in my my studies in recent years. But at the time of writing this booklet and recent updates to it, it doesn't feature overly in there, and I don't think it has to. But these four truths that the Buddha offered, these four realizations, recognitions. The word used is the same as its truth, is satcha, and it can mean a recognition, a recognition, a realization, or a truth. And so this recognition that life's difficult, life's stressful, life's uncomfortable, life's full of unavoidable suffering, and that's difficult for us. So the Buddha says suffering of birth, of old age, of sickness, of death, the suffering, the stress of pain, lamentation, grief and despair. He says the second truth is that a lot of this suffering is caused by our craving for things to be other than how they are. We crave for stimulation, we crave for excitement, we crave for novelty, we crave to be someone, something, we crave for status. For some of us, some people at some point crave for annihilation, crave not to be here, crave for the world, the earth to open up and swallow them. And many of our addictions and compulsions come from these unwholesome cravings. And then he offers a third truth. He simply says there is a way out. There is a path that leads away from unavoidable suffering. And then in his fourth truth, he lays out this path. And we're not going to particularly delve into any of those truths over this series of talks. But it gives you another piece of the puzzle. And I am drawn to Buddhist psychology and Buddhist cosmology and Buddhist mythology and these Buddhist practices very much because they give me a framework and a language where I can express my experience of my human condition. In a similar way, there's the Stoic framework and language offers a complementary view of being human and gaining contentment and happiness. In the same way that modern psychology or positive psychology also offers a framework and a language to do the same. But I'm particularly drawn to, but not exclusively use, a Buddhist framework and Buddhist language and a lens to particularly view most of my life, although I do complement it with these other modalities. And the Buddhist perspective is so vast. The Buddha himself taught over 45 years, tens of thousands of talks that have been orally recorded and then written down. Now, I can't know every single talk that the Buddha gave. He offered the same advice in different ways to different people at different times, and placing different emphasis on different sets of teachings and practices. So it's a huge picture. But I think once you've got once you've got the corner bits in, maybe the Four Noble Truths are the corner bits of this big puzzle. Once you've got some of the other bits of the picture, you start to actually view what might be possible. You don't need every single piece of the puzzle to gain from it. I hope that makes sense, and that's why I continue to study, and I think I'll continue to study until I take my last breath, and I very much enjoy doing it. So these, so this first part of waking up, of coming into recovery, whether it's recovery from substance abuse or recovery for anyone on the Buddhist path, recovery from greed, hatred and delusion, recovery from that cock, from the snake and from the pig. The cock of greed and craving and infatuation, the snake of hatred and ill will and aversion, and the pig of ignorance, confusion, delusion. We're all in recovery from those three poisons, those three fires. We need an antidote to the poisons, and we need to put the fires out. So the first part of my entry onto that journey was to surrender to what was true, and to make a commitment to move away from suffering, to move towards the end of suffering. I would say at the time I did that, I did it out of aversion to my suffering rather than compassion. But over time, you know, the shift from aversion to compassion, it naturally materializes. So we had the truth of these truths themselves. We had the truth of someone being truthful, and we had the truth as a vow or a commitment to move to change our behaviour. And if you do print off the Hungry Ghost booklet, at the back there's actually a little script on a formal satya practice, a formal vow practice, where it's a sort of cut and paste job. You put your vow in the middle, and you just go through this practice. I had an email last week from someone said, "Thank you very much for your website. I've taken the satya," and she'd take the personal satya. And there are lots of personal satyas here, personal truths or vows, aspirations that might inspire you to change the way you live and aim for a certain goal. But then now I'm going to move on to the topic of tonight, which is generosity, the second theme in the themes I offer, and the things I wish I'd known set of themes, is this notion of generosity, of giving, of being generous. I should note or just clarify that although I've laid this path out in a sort of semicircular, let me see if I can share with you. So although I've laid these themes out in a sort of circular, linear fashion, they're not strictly linear, and you do move backwards and forwards and across between these themes. But without starting at this place of truth and surrender to how things actually are, then I couldn't go anywhere. The next seed I sowed along the way was this seed of generosity. And it wasn't easy for me, because generosity is true generosity is based on contentment. And I wasn't content. But let's pick up my I wasn't content, and I was still extremely selfish. I was the center of my universe. It's taken a long time, actually, to come to a point where I'm actually not the center of the universe. The world doesn't revolve around me. And it's useful in a mindfulness way to, when you remember something or recollect what needs to be recollected. You know, when I'm struggling, and I remind myself, you know, I'm not the center of the world. I'm not the center of the universe. You know, not to take things personally. But in early recovery, when you're struggling, you know, the world seems to contract in and around you. It certainly did around me, and I felt very disconnected. I felt very stressed. I felt very depressed. and very dissatisfied. And I'd come from, I'd had a very poor childhood, economically poor, emotionally poor, what might be termed a toxic childhood, where the social security or social services might describe my family as being a troubled family. So there was never a lot of money, and after 25 years of heavy drinking, when I stopped drinking, there wasn't a lot of money either. In fact, an awful lot of debt, a huge amount of debt. So a feeling of not having enough was amplified at that time because of where I am. But this quality of dana, and I'll use the word dana just to start with, which is the Pali word. These words come from the early Buddhist texts, the early recordings of what the Buddha said, particularly in the Theravada tradition. You don't need to know these words, but some of them are difficult to translate into English, and they don't carry the same meaning. This word dana, which actually translates as giving rather than generosity, and particularly in terms of giving it as an act of giving, whereas generosity, which is part of it, is more of an internal quality, a generousness of heart, a generousness of words, rather than the giving of material things or time, whatever it is we're passing on with generosity. Generosity. I place generosity at this point of the structure, because this dana, this generosity, is a gift, and the next step on the path is the ethical, moral, harmless nature of results of a commitment to harmlessness through the precepts is a gift. So generosity of heart, of spirit, of words gives rise to living in harmony, to living harmlessly. Generosity gives rise to kindness, to friendliness, to compassion, to joy, and to equanimity. Generosity of heart and spirit, of mind, gives rise to forgiveness, forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. It gives rise to fellowship and service. How many ex-addicts do I know that have entered into recovery services, into drug and alcohol recovery services? Quite a few. It seems to be almost natural that having found freedom ourselves, that we want to share that with others. And having a generous quality, cultivating generous quality of heart and mind, aids and eases our meditation practice, our mindfulness practice. So it's a very important seed to sow on this path. And according to the early Pali texts, these early Buddhist texts, the Buddha would often teach lay people this. Well, in fact, he would always teach lay people about generosity, about ethics, before he would move on to the Four Noble Truths or detailed, meditation instructions. These are the groundworks. These are the foundations upon which to build that more spiritual, that more practical side of his teachings. This generosity includes a willingness to give to ourselves as much as what we give to others. So I was thinking, my intent when coming back from Los Angeles and starting a sit and share meeting in Newbury in Berkshire, and going along week after week, often sitting on my hand, was, I suppose, an act of generosity. And I think of it now, and my ex-wife would say on a winter's night, you know, raining or snow, she said, there'll be no one there. And I said, well, I'm going to go anyway. Just want to go in case someone turns up. It's an act of generosity. So, and this generosity, genuine generosity is founded on contentedness. It leads to contentedness. And it is the antidote to discontent. The antidote, this prevailing doctrine of insufficiency, that I haven't got enough, I need more. Well, how much more do we need? So this dana as giving, dana as a generous quality of heart and mind, in our thoughts, in our words, and in our actions, in the widest possible sense. The Buddha tried, when he left home, struggling. I always see the Buddha as a young man struggling with trying to understand the world, trying to find meaning in life. And he left home at 29, and he spent 6 years carrying all sorts of different practices, some of them extremely unhealthy, almost. I won't go into them in detail here, but he got to a point where he'd stopped eating, and he could feel his backbone. If he touched his stomach, he could feel his backbone, and if he touched his back, he could feel his ribs. He was so close to death, and he decided, no, this isn't the way. This isn't the way out of suffering. This is just bringing more suffering. So he decided that he was going to eat. He was going to eat, and then, you know, see where that got him. And as it happens, a milkmaid found him. Sujata, a milkmaid named Sujata, found him and offered him a meal, offered him a rice gruel, which he took, you know, I wouldn't say eagerly, but carefully. And that started to restore him to health. And that was before he decided to sit under the Bodhi tree and you know, put more effort in. But Sujata, you know, when coming across this dirty, ragged, almost skeleton of a man, and with her open heart, she offers him a rice gruel, something to eat. It's a real genuine act of kindness. He must have looked like an emaciated beggar, but what she was going to offer somewhere else, she offered to him. So dana or generosity as a seed of practice, a preparation for more. Generosity opens the door to gratitude and to contentment. So we might see this process in terms of awakening or recovery as the cultivation of gratitude, of contentment, and this, which is a sort of circular in that that supports and promotes our further generosity and giving. It feeds into any joy. It feeds into joy we cultivate. It's the antidote to harmful mind states. It's the antidote to greed, hatred, antidote to aversion and selfishness. It helps us to let go of our craving, our clinging for status, for sensual pleasure, our grasping, clinging and craving to safety, to what we perceive to be safety, a grasping, clinging for certainty, grasping and clinging for control. And none of those things are, you know, are tangible. None of those things actually exist. But we spend an awful lot of time grasping and clinging for safety, certainty, control. Dana or generosity could almost be a synonym for loving kindness or universal friendliness. The Pali word is metta. And And in many ways, generosity could be considered yet another heart practice, on top of the other heart practices that we'll be discussing in a couple of weeks. So just in the sense of the Buddha asks us to dwell in friendliness, to dwell in compassion, to dwell in joy, to dwell in equanimity, we are asked to dwell in generosity. There's a little slide I'd like to share with you if I can find it. And this is what I ask people to take away with them, whether I'm teaching a one-day retreat, a weekend retreat, or a 5-day retreat, it doesn't matter. I ask to take away this this instruction, or this these words of the Buddha. Excuse me. I ask them to take away these words of the Buddha, where the Buddha says that what your mind frequently thinks and ponders becomes the inclination of your mind. I've put heart here because in Buddhist practice, Buddhist psychology, the heart and mind are linked. So maybe I should have put inclination of the heart mind. But what we frequently think and ponder becomes the inclination of our mind, the inclination of our heart. It's how we incline towards the world. And that's why the Buddha puts such emphasis on knowing what you're thinking, knowing where your mind is dwelling. Is my mind dwelling in the heaven realms? Is it dwelling in the hell realms? Is my mind dwelling in joy and compassion and loving kindness? Or is my mind dwelling in ill will, cruelty, despair and depression? So knowing where your mind is and actually deliberately inclining it towards these higher mind states, towards joy, towards compassion, towards generosity, has a huge impact on how we see the world and how the world reflects itself back at us. So if you take anything away from tonight, or anything away from these 8 weeks, it might just be that what my mind frequently thinks and ponders will become the inclination of my heart. Before we move on to questions, I just want to share a couple of quotes with you, or a couple of other little items with you. There's a lovely sutta. I would say sutta. A sutta is a discourse. A sutta is a talk the Buddha gave and it's being remembered. Sutta means thread. So these are various talks. There's a lovely talk that the Buddha gives to a young man. He finds one morning offering rituals, and it's quite a long sutta. And the Buddha offers the young man advice on how a lay person should behave in the world. And it's a rather interesting a bit of advice that he gives to the young man. He says that as an employer, the young man, there are 5 ways that he should look after his workers. As an employer, these are 5 ways you should look after your workers. You should allocate them work according to their aptitude. You should be providing wages and food. You should be looking after them when they're sick. You should be sharing special treats with them, giving them bonuses. And you should be giving them reasonable time off work. Now, the Buddha was saying this 2,600 years ago. And for me, this is in generosity embodied. This is being kind, as being generous to the people that you're responsible for. There's a download on the 5th Precept Sangha website. It's called Starter Pack, Sit and Share Starter Pack, and it's got lots of example topics in there under these themes, under the theme of truth, under the theme of generosity, under the theme of ethics, under the theme of heart practices, etc., etc. And under the theme of generosity, there's a couple of quotes I'd like to end my talk with. One of them is from Anne Frank, from the Diary of Anne Frank. And she says, no one has ever become poor by giving. Which is a very short and sweet topic, perhaps for reflection at a future sit and share meeting. And the other quote is, speaking of generosity, one Lama describes the torment of withholding and fear, having some possessions a person holds tight to them with a dying person's grip. No matter how much they have, they still think they have nothing and moan as if they were on the point of starvation. Such behaviour can create right now the experience of those of the hungry ghost. So our fear of not having enough, a fear of not letting go, can take us into the hungry ghost realm here and now. So we're going to allow you to unmute your microphones. I think Jude is going to do that now. Also, she's going to allow you to type things in the chat. But if you have any questions and you want to type them rather than speak out loud, you can type them in. I'll try and keep an eye on that, and Jude will try and prompt me if I forget. I don't look at the second screen very often. I'll try not to, and the writing's very small. So if anyone, I hope you found some of that, bit of a ramble. I was trying to catch up on getting away too fast last week. And so a little bit of a ramble, but you know, an introduction into this mind model of these places where we dwell, where we find ourselves, and these themes of entering recovery, the seeds we sow in recovery, seeing the truth, the commitment to the truth, loosening the grip on our wanting to control, not having enough, and discontent, in order to find contentment. So this developing this quality of generosity in thoughts, words, and actions, which is where we sort of finish for today. And next week we'll pick up on the gifts, more generous gifts of the precepts of these suggestions, how to live harmoniously. So I hope Jude has now set the flag that allows you to unmute your own microphones, and also set the flag that allows you to type in the chat box should you wish to type a question. But if you're quite okay with turning your microphone off and asking a question, I'll try to answer. I can't promise anything.
Vince, hello, it's Nick here. Can you hear me?
I can. Is it Mick or Nick?
Nick.
Nick. Hi, Nick. Okay.
Hi. Yeah, I'd just like to ask a question regarding identity. Going back to that phrase you showed us, which I always think, I sort of simplify it a little bit, and maybe, I don't know if I change the meaning, and I think of it as what you think you become. Yeah. So one of the things I found years in AA was this thing of saying, hello, I'm Nick, I'm an alcoholic. And to the Buddhist meeting I now don't go to because of the lockdown, but the Buddhist meeting I attend regularly, we just introduce ourselves by name. And it got me wondering, on the one hand, I had years of telling myself I must never forget that I'm an alcoholic. I'm easily addicted to other things like the internet and some substances. I had a history of substances as well, not to the point of needing detox or anything. I don't want to forget I'm an alcoholic, but at the same time, I don't feel, as the years have gone by, I don't feel that's my identity. I just feel I'm Nick. And, you know, there's the whole anatta bit as well, which is, for me, a way off. I don't concentrate on that, but I have it as an idea. What do you think about this? Because you said earlier, I was an alcoholic.
Mm.
I just wonder what your thoughts are about the thing of identifying as an addict or alcoholic or overeater or sex addict or whatever it is, the compulsion, the gambler. What do you make of the identification? I don't want to forget, but at the same time, I don't want to keep reinforcing to myself that I'm somehow broken, because I've got other stuff. I've got trauma stuff I'm working on as well, childhood trauma, and I'm in therapy for that. And part of that is about self-nurturing and saying, I'm not just a survivor, you know, I'm who I am now. And that doesn't have to be a survivor in the same way as it doesn't have to be alcoholic. I just wonder what your thoughts are, Vince. I'll mute myself again.
Thank you, Nick. That's a brilliant question. It's a big question, but it's a brilliant question, which reminds me of what I should have slipped into the talk at the beginning about, you know, the characteristics of impermanence that the Buddha offers us. You know, that everything's impermanent, everything's transient, temporary, and impermanent, and it's unreliable. You know, everything's unstable, unreliable, inconstant. And that leads to a hell of a lot of suffering because you know, we crave certainty, security, control, and we can't have that if everything's unreliable. And then, as you said, the anatta, you know, this characteristic of no fixed, unchanging, controllable self. Now, the idea of that I can't find a fixed, unchanging, controllable self, I find hugely liberating, wonderful. I adore no self, because it fits so neatly into impermanence. It fits so neatly into this idea, and we'll look at it when we come to forgiveness, that, you know, that's who I was. It's not who I am, and it's not who I will be. And, you know, the good work and the success, you know, in quotes, that 12-step fellowships have, you know, is great. What, you know, if but to keep repeating, you know, this mantra of I'm an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic, it's like saying, you know, yeah, I was an alcoholic, I am an alcoholic, I'm going to die an alcoholic. It's like saying, you know, I was a bad person, I am a bad person, I'm going to be a bad person. And you have to work very hard at that. You know, you really do. The truth is, you know, I'm not the same person I was, you know, 30 minutes ago or an hour ago when we started this conversation tonight. I've changed. So this truth of impermanence, you know, rather than fight it, we harness it. This is our life. So that's who I was. It's not who I am. It's certainly not who I will be. You know, with our thoughts, we create the world. I think is a colloquial rendition of the first couple of lines of the Dhammapada. And with our thoughts, we create our world. The quote the Buddha says about the two types of thinking, what the mind frequently thinks and ponders becomes the inclination of the mind. One of my teachers, Christina Feldman, rephrases that. She says, what the mind frequently thinks and ponders shapes your mind. The shape of your mind shapes your world. So there's absolutely no doubt, you know, then, well, the Buddha was the first person to sort of latch onto this process, this being human as being a process, a constant process of change, and how important thoughts were. You really got it. So even now, you know, with neurobiology and modern psychology, you know, what we think we become. And the wheel of becoming, there's 12 links around the wheel we've been looking at. It's all about what we think we become, what we attach to, we become. So what we think is so important, knowing what we think. So this process of mindfulness, of knowing where my mind is, not just knowing where my mind is, but actually deliberately inclining my mind in a certain direction. You know, one meaning of mindfulness is not to forget something you'd heard. Another meaning of mindfulness is to keep something in mind. So for someone on the AA 12-step path, what you keep in mind is, like, well, you know, there's danger here, and I'm an alcoholic, even if I don't particularly agree with that phrase. You know, if that recollection, keeping that in mind, I'm an alcoholic, moves them away from avoidable suffering, then that's a good thing. You know, so, but, you know, what you keep in mind in order to move away from suffering, you know, is up to you. What works for you? The Buddha suggests, you know, keeping in mind, you know, universal friendliness, compassion, joy and appreciation, and equanimity. So to keep these things in mind. That's what mindfulness is. Not just, you know, being here now, knowing where my mind is, but deliberately and intentionally inclining our mind in the direction we want to go. Does that make sense, Nick?
That's really helpful. Thanks very much. I hadn't unmuted myself to say that.
That's
you.
Did I cover everything?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the cushion is still open, or there's still time for another question or two before 9 o'clock. I'll read this out because it's come to me privately. Thank you for the wise words today. Please clarify the recovery word. I've always assumed that I came out of the chute perfect, where Buddha nature was intact. It's just the obscurations and unwise things covered up. That perfect state, it's a matter of recovery, that original state as a perfect newborn. That's an interesting perspective, and yeah, I mean, if it helps to think of our life like that, as being when we come into this world having this perfect Buddha nature, and it just gets sullied and distorted and covered over. I certainly remember being a very kind child, and I had nothing, and I gave things away. I used to give things to the annual Blue Peter Christmas appeal all the time, and yet I had nothing myself. But then, as I entered puberty, all that changed, and that's when I started drinking as well. At 12, 13, I started drinking, and all that got beaten out of me emotionally and not so much physically, but socially, emotionally beaten out of me. And while I was drinking, I don't think I was a particularly nice person at all. I hope that's changed. So yeah, if it helps to think of that way, that we're uncovering what was already there, we're purifying, in the sense of getting rid of the unhelpful, unwholesome things. That's fine. It's whatever path, practices we take, as long as we know that they wholesomely lead us away from suffering and lead towards the end of suffering, then for me, that's a valid path, whatever label you put on it. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit confused. I'm getting private messages come through, and I can't actually see the private messages because I'm using my phone camera to record, not to record the talk, but to interface with you, because the camera on my laptop is broken. Both my laptops are broken in one way or another. So I've had to hook a whole range of things together to give you this talk tonight. So we don't have to sit until 9. In fact, let's do that. Unless everyone's got a burning question now, we're going to sit for 5 minutes and close our, just over 5 minutes. We're going to have a little Brahma Vihara 5-minute sit to bring our evening to a close. Everyone cool with that? Okay. If you need to leave now, by all means leave, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 7:30, where we'll be looking at harmlessness and the precepts. But for now, if you'd like to turn your video off and mute your microphones, and I'll get the closing meditation. So very quickly we settle into an upright, dignified posture. Just sit up straight, just acknowledge you're going to meditate. If it's comfortable, you might just let your eyes gently close. Let your face be soft, jaw relaxed. Let the shoulders drop back to open up the heart area. Let your arms and your hands just rest easily on your thighs or in your lap. Let your belly be soft. Maybe take a very deep, full in breath. And a very long, slow out breath. And then, in a similar way to the phrases of our opening meditation, I'm going to offer you some phrases to whisper silently at the back of your mind. And just repeat them. Hold on to the phrases that resonate with you. Let go of the phrases that aren't so helpful. Check in with your heart center to see if there's a resistance or an acceptance, a welcoming. Whatever you find in your heart center, just meet that with kindness and compassion. May I find stillness in the midst of chaos. May I be at ease in the midst of discomfort. May I be safe and well in the midst of uncertainty. May I live with kindness in the midst of all that is difficult. May I find stillness in the midst of chaos. May I be at ease even in the midst of discomfort. May I be safe and well in the midst of all that is uncertain. May I live with kindness in the midst of all that is difficult. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to check my agenda. Next week's theme is the gifts of harmlessness. Just a reminder that these talks are offered absolutely freely, generously, generosity of heart, mind. But if you'd like to contribute to these teachings, then there's a link on the Hungry Ghost website. and there'll be a link on the YouTube video when I post this online. So thank you all for the gift, your gift of your presence, your gift of your patience, and your gift of your practice here with us tonight. Thank you very much indeed. I don't know whether Jude wants to unmute all, and if you'd like to shout good night or say good night, you're more than welcome.
Good night, Vince. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Vince. Nice one.
And don't
Good night,
forget,
Vince. Thank you again.
don't share tomorrow. Don't share at 8 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vince.
And Jason's in the chair. Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks very much indeed. Good night all. Be
Bye.
safe. Be well.
Yeah,
Thanks, Vince. Thanks, Vince.
Smiling. Yeah.
Bye.